city council meetings. So we'll ask for comment at the agenda item here in a bit. If there's something that's not on the agenda that you want to speak to, we'll ask you to come up at that time. But otherwise, we'll introduce the item under the agenda, ask people to comment at that time, then we'll close the public comment section, and the council will have their discussion at that point. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions? Okay. So first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed nay. Motion passes. Next item is the consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda. Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item is public comment. Is there anybody here that would like to speak to something that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, move down to old business water meter agreement. Is there anybody from the public like to speak to this agenda item? Seeing none, council discussion. I guess I'll explain this a little bit to the council where we came from. Based on the council's discussion at the last meeting, Dakota put together an agreement. The only thing, Dakota, I noticed is that where it states, whereas if and when a new water service line is installed, the original water service line will be removed by the city.
We'll leave that in there, the line is correct.
No, we're taking that out because we're not removing
No,
that old line.
we're leaving the line and so we're taking out that line.
Yeah, so we
Yes.
need to remove that line. And then on page 2, under number 5, where it says the city agrees to waive, you have the waive again. That's the two items that I saw.
Is that in there? What's the move? Requirement. Student iPhone. So you're acquiring a student iPhone. Yeah.
Is there any council discussion on this agenda item? No, I'll entertain a motion.
I have a question first. Where it says that we've agreed to pay the 5,000, do we need to stipulate that that is no matter when it happens? That that's all that will be approved?
I don't think so, but Dakota, I'll let you address that.
We had that discussion around, what if it takes 10 years to do this?
Yeah, but if the agreement says,
Yeah. It's a
Hard number.
Yeah.
So I guess there's two things. One, it's not transferable, so it's just for the owners of 77 East Ancient Road right now. And there's not a time limitation on it, so it's not, we don't want to set a time limitation saying it in the next 5 or 10 years we'll do that. It's just whenever the line gets put in. So I don't think we need to have any language that addresses any timing mechanisms on it. I think the only thing I'd say is putting time mechanisms in it, then it could expire before the line got put in, and then we're back to square one on this. We just want to leave it basically in perpetuity to when that line is moved, if it's the same homeowners, that's when we'll pay up to $5,000 at that time. But if it was, inflation's a thing, it's in 20 years, then it's whatever $5,000 that's how much we pay out of it. More than that, the homeowners would pay the remainder of that portion, based upon how this is written out.
no other discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
I motion to approve the water line agreement as presented
With
with the amendment.
Second.
moved and second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the variance notification ordinance. It's the second reading. Is there anybody here from the public like to speak to this agenda item? Stu?
Is that the Stu Young, building official. So this is to be a second reading for the
notification.
notification. Okay, I have like 3 or 4 little questions here. What Baldwin City Committee participated in, engaged in, or agreed with the writing of this ordinance?
Nobody, I introduced it.
Nobody. Did anyone reach out to the building department or zoning and codes or public works for their feedback or contribution for the ordinance?
Nope.
So who or whom directed the city attorney to write the ordinance?
I did.
I got a question here. Is that Board of Appeals thing going to be read tonight, or is that
It is.
at a separate?
Separate.
All right, that's my 3 questions. Thank you.
Anybody else from the public like to speak to this agenda item? Seeing none, council discussion?
You did all that yourself?
I did.
Can you do that?
Yeah, I can introduce ordinances.
You can what?
I can introduce an ordinance.
And what's this ordinance for? Tell me about it.
To notify the public if a building official denies a building permit application, then he gives them a notification with documentation on how they can apply for the variance, so that the public's aware of their rights under the variance code.
What code number is that?
The ordinance? Ordinance is number 1472.
And what's it say?
Should the building inspector cause any work to be discontinued due to the building inspector's determination that the work is being done in violation of this chapter, the building inspector shall provide the builder or owner with written notice of their right to appeal the decision in a manner by which an appeal may be requested.
Now, that's a new right. Is it
That's in
correct?
addition to that code.
And what this about? We have a code, don't we, that says that they can have a hearing or
It's
they
a
can-
way
or
to.
they can appeal it to.
It's a way to be transparent to the communities. Do you know how to do that?
How to do what?
How to apply for a variance?
I would suppose if he came to me and I had something to be inspected, he would tell me how to do it.
There's nothing requiring that. It's no different than a law enforcement officer when they write a ticket, put the court date on the citation so that people know their rights. You can go dispute it if they think it's improper.
I think it's just adding an extra layer of transparency, so people are aware of the process if they disagree.
That's all it is, transparency.
So how would, that's gotta have a board.
Correct. We have another ordinance in here tonight that's being introduced, that's in your packet, setting up that board. Because it was already in our code that we had a variance, but we never had a process for that variance.
I don't necessarily agree with all that.
Why? What's the downside to it?
I think in that book that we got into about with the fire marshal thing, I think there's a thing in there that says something about this kind of deal. You've got to have a board of professional people to sit on that board to do that.
And that's that's the other ordinance tonight.
And they have to be, some of them 10 years in the deal, or it has to be a plumber that's a master plumber or a master electrician or something like that.
Or we can set it up how we choose to.
I don't think you can do that. I don't think you can change the code.
You can ask Dakota. We can change code. I think
You
that's
can't
it.
change the code.
Well,
We can change it.
so I think there's 2 different things we're talking about here. I think, and Jerry, we may be talking about, and Stu can, I think, speak to this as well, is there's an appendix B that that the way in which to set up a board of appeals and board of zoning appeals, where it lists out the qualifications that are required.
List the qualifications? Okay.
Correct, and that's appendix B. That has to be specifically adopted though. And we haven't specifically adopted that appendix B, we adopted the
But you cannot
2003
change the
code.
existing code.
So you can amend, we can amend, you can amend code, and you can amend, so what we dealt with earlier before, what we were speaking before was amending the code that was in the fire protection portion of the code. That, as long as it's not state law that prohibits you from amending it, there's an amendment process that you can go through. We have amendments to the code in our ordinances currently, but for the fire code that we went through, we cannot amend that section of the code without the written approval of the state fire marshal. So if it's related to fire protection, the city can amend code as it sees fit, but can't be passed without the approval of the state fire marshal upon their review. This does not, I think, we're talking about a notice provision here. It's amending code to add additional requirements for a building's administrator, but it doesn't implicate the fire code, so we don't need a state fire marshal approved for it. There's also not any state law that would prohibit you from amending or putting in place an ordinance that requires notice provision be put in place for denial of permit or the removal of the permit should you be non-compliance. So nothing in the code's changing here. The requirements of the code aren't changing, and this isn't, I think Stu spoke this last time, and it's been something that we've discussed repeatedly. This isn't changing the code. This is just if someone believes the code's been enforced incorrectly, interpreted incorrectly, or it doesn't speak to the issue at hand and it's been denied a permit or had their permit removed, they can file an appeal and take that up. What they can't do is come in and say, I don't think this section of code should be applied to me. I'm appealing the decision to apply the code. You're not appealing the code itself. You're appealing the enforcement of it and whether or not it's enforced correctly.
What's the word variance mean?
What's the word variance mean?
Yeah, what does the actual word variance mean? Doesn't that deal with land?
So a variance, if you go to so I think the best way to look at it is where variance are in the zoning regulations. So the variance would
But
be
that
a
deals
change in
basically with
plan.
land, does it not?
Correct. It deals with how the land's zoned. So it's zoned,
So how does variance, in the term that you're using it here, apply?
I'm not using the term variance.
Well, he did.
He may have used the term variance. The code, the section of the ordinance here refers to building permits and denial of building permit or denial of or removal of that permit. So it's a permitting section, so it's an appeal of that denial or appeal of the removal. The variance process would be if you're asking for something that's designated as, C1 to be designated as C4 for a different type of use, and then there's specific sections of the code that tell you, or in the zoning regulations that tell you under what circumstances you can approve that variance, and the Board of Appeals, the Board of Zoning Appeals is the one who takes those up. So this only has to do with permits or the removal of the permit,
But that's not a variance.
not a variance. It would be because you're saying, in essence, I'm applying for a permit for a permitted purpose, and whoever's making the determination about the permit has denied me that permit, and I'm saying that denial has been done in error. So it's a question of interpretation there. I mean, I think Stu could speak to this. I think other city staff can speak to this, but we have very, very, very few instances, if any, in the recent history of building permits being A, even denied, and then B, contested. But this would be for those rare instances when someone comes in and says, I want a building permit, and they're denied the building permit, and they think that's been denied in error. Not that they want part of the code to not apply to them, but that the code application itself has been done incorrectly. So that's the purpose of this, is to give notice to a homeowner, builder, company, whoever it is that's requesting the permit. If it's denied or it's revoked, the process they can go about to contest that decision. And again, I think Stu can speak to this too. I think the way it is right now is any denial of a permit has to be, you have to have a written up grounds for why that's denied. So you have that, you have the determination, and then based upon that determination, you can then challenge whether or not the code was correctly applied. But there's nothing changing code here, and there's nothing, actually we're not amending the code here either. We're just asking it'd be an additional requirement of any building administrator to give notice, written notice to a permit applicant if they're denied the permit, but how to go about appealing that denial.
That's only if it's denied.
Only if it's denied. But that's the only time you need to get information about how to appeal.
Has this been published?
It's not been published, it hasn't been voted on yet. The first
You
reading,
Publish it while it's in session before it goes back to the second reading?
no, it's published upon, after being passed, that's when the publication would occur. That's what would make it, once it's published, then it becomes
Then it becomes a
city ordinance.
city ordinance, city code or city ordinance.
City ordinance. Because we're not amending the code here at all.
You can't do that all the time.
Well,
Yes, you can.
I'll say this.
Not under 2003.113.2.3.
I'm just talking about this explicitly is an amending code, so that's not an issue here. What it's doing is just requiring a building administrator to to provide written notice of appeal rights should a permit be denied.
Just first or second reading?
Any other discussion on this agenda item?
Is there any sequence issue here? We don't have, this talks about providing process information, and we haven't voted on, didn't sound like we currently have one. So I don't know what we provide if the other ordinance doesn't pass, so.
We spoke about that. The publication process will take 30 days or so, to even enacted on this. So by that time, we should be working for the other one. But
What I would suggest is, given that they're acting in concert, you could certainly do the first reading of the other ordinances tonight,
Yeah,
postpone voting on this until you have the first reading, the next council meeting, so you vote all of them together, take them up together. But the other issue you're gonna have is that it's a 5-member board. If you do pass the other ordinance, you'll have to get that seated as well. So now that you can give people notice about what they need to do, but it may not physically be possible to appeal it at that point if there's not a board in place to do that, since it's not like the Board of Zoning Appeals and then the Planning Commission, which are using the same 5 folks.
Yeah.
So, so that might just be more of a practical issue.
right.
What has occurred to create this?
nothing, just going through the code and realizing that there's no structure set up for something like this. We need to have a process set up for things like this. Even if it's not utilized, I will admit that it's probably not gonna be utilized if ever. But if we don't have a process for our citizens to appeal a decision, then what do you have?
With the process, I think it's covered in our code,
It's not covered.
in our rules and regulations.
It's not.
They have the right to appeal.
So where?
They have the right to appeal anything. I think it's in that same.
Where do they
same
appeal to?
book. 2003, but I don't know which section number for that. That any citizen has the right to appeal.
They have a right to appeal.
And then they have a board for that appeal that goes to.
It's not set up under our ordinances.
It is under our ordinances because we adopted that book in 2003. And it's in there.
It's not set up, Jerry. I mean, unless you're arguing with our attorney.
What is, well, 2 different things we're talking about too, I think. There's the 2003 International Building Codes.
Right? And we adopted that.
We've adopted that. And then there's also the zoning regulations that are in our planning commission zoning board ordinances, and we've adopted those separately as well. So there's two separate documents. So the question then becomes, for building permit denials, or building permits in our ordinances, are those addressed with a means in which to appeal them? There's two separate times when that happens, one at the beginning and one when it's taken away in mid-process. Our ordinances speak directly to, if you have a permit and it's full, you appeal that to the governing body. So and when you if you deny a permit, our ordinances don't speak to that. The zoning regulations speak to some language about appeals, but it's unclear if that's about zoning regulations or if it's about a permit. This just makes it much clearer as to how you appeal that permit denial. Again, going back to it, and we had so few permit denials, and then from that, so few people who want to appeal it, this will probably be used very sparingly at the most, but this is outside of what we've adopted from the code perspective as being more closely regulated to the zoning regulations and the Board of Zoning Appeals and the Planning Commission. And there is language in those regulations about appeals, but it's unclear what is being appealed. And so this is making it clear that the appeal is for denial of the building permit or the removal of that building permit based upon not following code.
But doesn't that fall in that code book that we still use, 2003?
I don't believe so. The code itself would be what would be making the decision about not granting the permit. So you're using the code book, whoever the building administrator is looking at the code
It
book,
is a code book, yes.
would be looking at the code book to tie to whether or not to grant you a permit. What I don't see anywhere in that is then the appeals process by which you ask, who you would ask them to reconsider the decision of the building administrator.
Okay, if you got one side that says there's a code there,
Mhm.
and you cannot go by that code, and you can't change that code,
Mhm.
how are you gonna turn around and legally change it so that you can have a hearing without going through that book that's already been adopted?
So you're not, so if their code details everything that you need to have in place for certain buildings before you can get a permit, correct? There's certain processes you have to go through before you can get that permit granted to you. What the appeal process would be for is not saying, I don't agree with this portion of code. It's only about, application of that code, whether or not the application was correct, or whether if there's an area of the code that is maybe silent or is unclear, that the interpretation of the code it's being misinterpreted. But it's not coming into saying that I don't need to have architectural renderings for this. I don't agree with that portion of code, so I'm appealing the need to follow that part of the code. So you're not debating over what should be enforced by the code, but whether you're debating over how the code is being interpreted and enforced. The code's never changed.
Suggestion here. I think it makes sense to co-determine these, ordinances if we get through the next one on the second reading next time. This will still be there. This will give you time to go find whether this ordinance is not needed. You can bring that back. So I would recommend that we don't act on this. We wait until we have the ordinance that sets up the appeals board, and then hopefully it will become clear. This is basically saying, here's the process, and it's go to this board that we just set up. So it'll give you some time to bring information forward if you got it.
I got it.
You shouldn't be doing it. So we'll look forward to that next time.
I got it.
Okay. Everybody good with that? I mean,
Yeah,
Sounds
I
great.
agree with
Alright,
that.
Sounds great.
All right, next agenda item, Orange Street site plan. Russ, kick this off.
Good evening, everybody. On June 13th, Planning Commission met actually here in the library, and we heard the site plan for Osage Acres. It was voted on 3-1. for approval. So we have the owners are here, and I think they've got they got the PDF, so
We'll have
I
them
can-
step forward then and give a brief synopsis, and then we'll open it up for public comment.
That's in the computer.
I'm not gonna stand close to the mic, I think you'll all be able to hear me. This is the 6.3 acres, 6.2 acres we'd originally applied for rezoning for the industrial area. When we first did our building and our layout, one of the things that we thought we would do was try to build a berm on this backside next to the houses in between. And we also had a bunch of driveways in the back of the building, and the big concern was people parking stuff, trailers, cars, collectibles, junk in the back of the building through different consultants and recommendations based upon where the sewer line is, and that's this checkered line right here, okay? We've moved our building further east. We're looking at putting in a privacy fence. Based upon the code of the entrance, it has to be moved from where we currently have. We put a culvert in so we could access the property to start doing some work on that. It has to move up based upon the code. At planning and zoning, this last week, we heard some issues about water. This is a 100-year floodplain. The issues that were proposed or from our neighbors are uphill from us. By law, these civil engineering plans are required to receive the water above us and extract it into this 100-year floodplain. The last thing we would do for ourselves is create a flood issue for the people above us. And if that were the case, then we would be creating a flood issue for our own building, which would be pretty detrimental for a new facility. We put all the entrances and the garage doors on one side right here. This is a gated entrance to the storage. This is a fenced-in area right here, gravel, couple of buildings. We're looking at starting with 2 storage buildings and 1 commercial building.
Any questions?
To orient myself, so where's 10th Street?
Here,
Okay.
it's actually this line right here,
So,
orange.
yeah, so I think you mentioned it's different than what we were shown first time where the berm would be up against.
Right there.
I thought it would be where those buildings are, actually between property owners and,
Yeah, I'm sorry, this is not 10th Street. 10th Street is over here. There's no houses in here. This is the actual building with the storage. This is our property line right here. This is our fence right here. So 10th Street is over
Okay.
here. Does that help?
yeah, a little bit.
Those are basically backyards. that
Right.
is-
Yeah.
I think the concern was, obviously, I think it was site, just sight lines and, and lighting. I think that's what was driving the berm. So did you say there's gonna be fencing then that would,
Well, first of all, when we had that plan, our building was here, and we had a drive that went around the back that created a bunch of additional lighting, and that's where all of our garage doors, which we listened to the concern, and we put, everything is now on the west side. I mean, there'd be a safety light on our end of it, and we've got our safety lighting plan with our parking lot, but this is the area that we're trying to light. We're not trying to light the back of our building.
George, so why, explain to me, you said that code required you guys to move your entrance to the east?
Yeah.
Why is that?
David Hamby is on vacation right now. He is our consultant with B&G Consultant, and based upon the recommendations of this driveway and this driveway, this had to be moved. Because ours is currently right here.
Yeah, that's why,
That's,
I think that's maybe where Scott was going is,
Do we have a distance of how far driveways can be from each other?
yeah, that's exactly why he had to move it. Because there's so many feet that they have to be, they gotta be off center. I think that was his term that he used, was that they have to be so many feet off center
On center what?
of another drive. We can't be on center with this drive, we can't be on center with this drive. There's,
Is there a distance you have to be from the corner?
I don't believe so.
Well, I don't know, I'm asking.
He told us when he moved the drive that he had to move it based upon a code and offsetting driveways. And that's why we hired him, so he would look at all the codes, so he would get our civil engineering plan stamped. One of our original concerns was we thought we would need to put in a retaining pond based upon the water flow. That's a bad idea.
Now,
That's creating a
I
problem.
went through a discussion that we had with this before, where they were building a berm and planting trees or something to that effect.
Yeah, he's showing it there, just moved it to the west.
To the east.
We're putting, instead of that berm and trees,
We're putting a fence.
Let's come back to the east.
So let's be clear, the berm.
would have been back
west
here.
From where I thought we were talking about.
The berm does not
There's
exist.
no more berm.
There's no more berm.
East.
Oh, so no berm, just a fence.
Yeah.
And no drive around the building, no lighting.
Where's that fence line?
Right here.
Okay, gotcha. I'm with you.
What street is that? What's the street below?
Orange,
That's Orange Street?
yes.
Okay.
This is the entrance to the maintenance or to the facilities and grounds, and this is the office.
10th Street is just a little bit east of that.
It's, well, all of the houses are here, and then 10th Street is over here.
Okay. Got you.
So, George, explain why, you're asking for an exemption to, provide a stormwater management plan? It says-
Well, runoff.
That was the storm, the sewer, not the sewer, but water retention pond. We thought it was talked about having a water retention pond, and when they did their analysis, it'd hold water up going into this 100-year floodplain, and that was a bad idea, having a retention
So,
pond
Where's the water gonna go now?
straight into the creek.
And how does that do that? I don't, the plans don't show me,
Well, this is the highest point on the property, and this is a 100-year floodplain. And when we just had 8.5 inches of rain, or 9.5 inches, there were 9 entrances of water leading into that creek. I mean, controlled water, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to control some of the water that's leaking down across here, leaking over here. We're trying to get it right to there. That's where this used to be a pond, right into the creek right there. Which is downhill from we would not be creating a flood problem for ourselves in doing our elevation.
That property slopes from east to west.
30, 45 feet.
okay.
That's the way it goes today.
What type of building are you
So
planning
there'll
on
be a-
building?
Excuse me?
What type of building are you planning on building? Is it gonna be a wooden structure or a metal structure or?
Metal structure, metal building is what we're planning
Slopes that way.
for both storages
Trying to hold that.
and for this industrial building as well.
Pretty graded, so.
Now, your storages are going to be for rent or?
Yeah, storage rentals, 10 by 15s.
Okay.
I mean, we have room to add more,
I see
but,
that.
yeah, that's, the intent is we have so many doors and so many square foot,
I
yeah.
understand what rental properties are.
Yeah.
And the other property that you're building there, the other building you're building, what is that used for?
We're intending on leasing it out to light industrial use. We've had several people come to us locally that are looking for space. We still got to work that out, but people that are doing trades in town. Some of them are doing them at their homes, some of them are doing it at different shops around town.
Are you going to police it to make sure that it doesn't turn into be a junkyard now?
Yeah, Jerry. Yes, sir.
So the only reason those buildings got moved to the east is because of that entrance.
Entrance and sewer line. Because the entrance would go right over the top of the sewer line, basically, if it wasn't
Right.
offset. Other questions?
Any other questions for George?
I don't know that I'd wanna live back in there. To live east of that or even a little farther east of that and look at a building, just blocking my view. Are you gonna plant some trees back there or something?
Our intent is to put up a building, have a clean wall, put up a commercial fence, and keep it as clean as possible. We don't want traffic back there.
What do you call them, commercial fence?
6-foot wood, commercial fence. We don't want traffic back there. We don't even want to have access back there. That's gonna create more of a problem. We're having a back front, dropping in our AC units. I think there's individual doors at the back by the AC units. No, there's not. Everything's in front. We don't even have back doors. And these buildings aren't big enough. They don't require any type of sprinkling system. We've met all of our code. There's no need based upon this square footage and the runoff and the drain. There's no need for storm drainage. Runoff is very ample for the size of building and
Are they gonna have water, electricity and sewer and all that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that first
Will the
one.
building have water, electricity and sewer?
Oh, absolutely. This building right here
Yeah.
will have all services. These will just have power. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know.
Anybody else have any questions for George? Thank you, George.
Thanks.
Anybody else from the public like to speak to this agenda item? You can step up to the mic. The only thing I should have mentioned this, state your name and address for the record.
Wendy Dahlquist at 1417 10th Street. They're right behind my house, my property, ruining my view. And, I'm still trying to figure out how all of you people went against your zoning committee bylaws that said that was supposed to be left residential, and petitions that a lot of people signed to even turn that into an industrial area back there. But I'm still trying to figure out how you people did that to us. Devalued our property. I mean, even if this is nice and everything, the value of our homes will go down because we have industry behind us. If this falls through and they sell it to someone else or rent it out to somebody else, are you guys going to keep up on that and make sure that it doesn't have hazardous material or drugs going through there or whatever? Is that going to be policed by you guys? Since you turned it into an industrial area in a residential area? I mean,
So usually we'll just take the comments during this and then
Okay.
council discussion.
And,
Just so, I don't want you to think we're ignoring you.
well, you have kind of in the past, but, and the other thing is he's changed all this from the beginning, which I guess you've all realized that. It looks good and everything, although we asked at the last meeting, the zoning meeting, to have copies of this. Their contractor guy, we asked him if we could see this board because it was turned this way. And he told us that he was working for them. So that was we haven't really looked at this to get to see it. And I don't know how many of you have driven down in that area when it rains. George mentioned the 9 inches of water, but I mean, we can get an inch of water down there. And Mr. Burton's property has a ditch there. It looks like a river. So when they build that up, which they're going to have a pad, concrete, parking lot, where are they going to put the water? I mean, he keeps saying it's going to go that way. How fast is it going to go that way? Is it going to back up into our yards, into our gardens, into our fences? Can we not keep stuff? Mr. Burton can't keep stuff in his backyard now. You know, it's wet almost all the time. So I'm asking you to please consider this very carefully. If this works, that's fine. But I want it delved into and not passed, and then it doesn't work and there's nothing we can do about it. So please, take that into consideration. We own property, we have children over there, we're already concerned about the roads, the traffic this is gonna create with big equipment. Maybe not a lot of traffic, but the big equipment. Have any of you ever driven down 10th? It's narrow. We lost our mailbox already. We've been here 2 years. And I mean, it was chopped off totally. Because you try and pass just a car and a truck and somebody's got to move over, go into a driveway or something. So I'm asking you to please make sure that what they're doing, the water's going to go someplace else besides back up in our yards. Don't need any more up there. So, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to help address that, because knowing that land, we're not building up this hill to put this deck in or this platform in. We're actually cutting this hill off and taking this dirt and moving it down here and trying to level this side off. Wendy, right from behind your house, we're not going to build this up. We're cutting this dirt off and moving it down to level this up. This is
So
probably.
this is going to be lower than our property?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As it is right now.
That's all. I'm
It will
asking
be
that
lower.
it be-
It will be lower than your property.
Could it be checked out prior to?
Has to be approved by 2 civil engineers and stamped before, they have to approve it on water flow, because that's law. You have to receive above hill and prepare for it. That's all, sorry.
Anybody else like to speak to this agenda item? Yes, sir.
I'm Ron Dahlquist. I'm Wendy's husband. And I've got the he house right behind this property here. My he house is right here. We live right here. I tried to get a driveway put in. I talked to the street department to see if they could put a driveway in by my he house so I could, put concrete in there like that. And they get a tube put in when they put their tube in for their driveway down here. And they said that they couldn't give a driveway up towards my house because they would have to go all the way back up to 10th Street and clean that ditch all the way out to get a view down, get the water to run down. And that would actually flood on this road here unless they could dig it clear down. And I asked them about, putting in a tube, and they said, we can just drive across that little ditch there, and there would be no problem. And that was for this driveway down here. And I don't know where he's talking about the second driveway.
Right where your finger was at.
Huh?
Right where your finger was at, that gray apron, right?
Right here?
To the right.
No, that's where the current driveway is.
It's the gray part, and it looks like an apron, looks like a tornado. Right there, go up here.
Go up a little bit.
Up
No,
here?
Up to the top of the page, go left and
Towards the
up.
top of the page.
They're up here?
No. Go up on the map,
This is where they're proposing the
right there.
entrance, the driveway.
And it's in here.
Yeah, to be moved from over here where it is currently to right here.
Well, they would have to clean out that ditch all the way back up to 10th Street then, to get the water to flow
Right.
down through the tube. They was going to put in a berm here and had trees, so we could have privacy here. Now they're going to put in a fence, and I think the fence is going to be right here on our property line, you know, and but the main thing too is this water comes down through here and it floods. Between these two houses here, the city went in and put a ditch down there, and that water just flows. All this water just flowing downhill from up here, you know, and it's a real problem. We asked for a water survey, you know, and we had a petition that we asked, you know, you guys to look at a water study, see what could happen here, because this is a real potential, and it could flood back in here, and or the problem there, but I know everybody thinks that we're just complaining because of they're doing it, but you know, we ask that they don't put in a, you know, they can build houses back here. They can build in some houses, but you know, they'd have to put them away. So, but this big building that they've got planned, and these buildings here, and then the storage facility here is going to be a real problem. And between 10th Street, and I think the last time I talked to you folks, I was worried about 10th Street and Orange Street too, because of the traffic, you know, the big traffic coming in. And, you know, there was a real problem there on 10th Street and on Orange Street too, but I don't know. We've only lived here for 2 years, and it's created us a real problem as far as our, you know, the cost of our house and everything else. Our values are going to go way down with this project here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I asked for a copy of this, you know, and I thought you was going to, or the city manager was going to give us copies of it. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know anything about that. I never heard that request, so.
I called the city manager after this was presented at the planning commission, and I told the city manager, you know, that we asked to see this, and if he could turn the board around so we could see it. And he said no, that he worked for them and not for us, and he wouldn't turn it around so we could see it. And the city manager said we would have a copy of this before tonight's meeting. And
It's online. It's in our packet. You can see it on the city website.
We're older people, I'm sorry.
Understood. You can have mine.
I mean,
well,
It's public
we
information.
can eventually get to it maybe, but
I mean, you know,
it would have been nice if we
Sure.
could
Yeah.
have seen this
Yeah.
prior to meetings, but
Well, either way, I'm gonna give you my copy.
thank you.
he assured me that we'd all get a copy of it before the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
George, I got one more question for you. How long is this fence gonna be that you're gonna build?
We've added ourselves quite an expense. It's gonna go, well, the intent is to cover this whole area. Our whole
You got,
east commercial end of this property.
you got footage on there?
419 feet.
419, 420 feet.
Anybody else like to speak to this agenda item? Yes, ma'am. Step forward.
My name is Amelia Conley. I live at 1001 Orange Street. I just wanted to point out, having lived there for over 20 years, and watching the Public Works building come up and the workers drive by every day, I really think this is a public safety issue, because their driveways are going, I don't know exactly, but they can't be very far apart. And they're gonna have to sit there and wait for people to come turn in or turn out, and sometimes they really need to get out there and do what needs to be done. So I really think it's a concern. Not to mention all the others.
Anybody else like to speak to this agenda item? If not, we'll close the public comment section and open up council discussion. So we have two requests in your packets. One is for the site plan approval. The other is to not require a drainage study, I believe. Yep.
Is approving the site plan also approving the exemption?
The council, it's at the council's will.
Okay.
You guys can do, make your motion however you wish.
But what I'm asking is this the site plan as presented with the exemptions? Okay.
So we got two issues. I think part of the reason we asked for the site plan to come back is because it was a bit contentious and it was a change, to the current zoning that we had. And, obviously it's changed. I won't say significantly, but it's changed from what we moved forward with. And so that tied in with the fact that, the residents didn't have a chance to see this information. For whatever form they need to get it in, it's not acceptable in my mind. So don't know if it would change things, but you got to at least allow them to understand what it is, provide feedback for that, and not just the night they see it for the first time. And even if there are other avenues, make it available. I think we all know that not everybody gets their information the same way. And I think we need to make sure that they have that. So I don't know, it's a question for George and team. I don't know what the urgency is on getting this done, as opposed to moving this to the next council meeting to allow the residents to see this and digest it. So those are my two concerns. And then obviously the survey, I'd definitely be interested in what the civil engineering sign off would be. I don't know, obviously it's probably not water, maybe it is. But once this site plan's approved, there's still those hurdles that you have to go through to actually be able to move forward. Right? This is not necessarily, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not necessarily a go, right? It's a go to the next step. If it's, site surveys, whatever you need to have done, those need to be done. They're professionals. So I guess a question for George on timing, 2 weeks delay on this site plan approval, what kind of hardship does that cause?
For the purpose of?
Letting
If you can just step forward,
just
we're recording this.
yeah, just letting residents that said they didn't have a
Yeah.
chance to see it.
Yeah. And, well, we thought,
That's just.
yeah, we thought it was already available. I mean, we've been going through this process
I know.
for 12 months. I mean, we had 5 months canceled
The
through
question
this.
is what is
What's 2 more
do?
weeks? Yeah, I mean, I guess,
I mean, are you, is there any incremental expense? I mean, what?
yeah, it's summertime, it's building season, the clock is ticking, and that is really, and we're behind the 8 ball. Because we are halfway through the build season, and being held up because planning and zoning couldn't get enough people to come to a meeting. So, I mean, what's 2 weeks? Whew.
No, that's,
Yeah, it really, it's an issue. It's, I mean,
that's why I
because.
asked the question, yeah.
Yeah. And as far as what does civil engineering have to sign off on, that's definitely water and drainage. And not one of them have to do it, two of them have to do it. And the most important thing here is that we're scraping off this hill to build up part of this valley. To get in our driveway right now, we had to take out 10 foot of dirt just to get an angle to where you could drive up in there. There's so much dirt there that was going to be moved down the hill that it will immediately address. We could possibly solve some of the drainage issues that is in the neighborhood right now. It's very feasible and very possible. I know that nobody is willing to hear that right now because this is new and it's going to be an obstruction of view, but you drop this building site down from where that line is, 10 feet, their water issues go away.
I'm sure the survey will validate that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't have the whole plans with all the elevations, but those are all in there that have to be stamped by civil engineer.
Thank you.
So is there a reason like, I'm sorry, somebody had their hand up.
Well, he was talking about,
Ma'am, this is council discussion portion, sorry.
Sorry.
If the council asks you to come up, then that's when.
I'll
it's
just get
my
my part.
property though.
We can open it up again if we need to, but I just wanted to say, is there something like proprietary about BG's map that wouldn't allow it to go out? I mean, why didn't that go out? We said.
I didn't know anything about it. I mean, I can't.
I'm just asking a general building question. Like, is there a reason like an engineering firm would not want their intellectual property maybe to be distributed? Is that like? Because I thought that was the whole.
Public information.
Yeah, it's already public.
We're gonna vote on that.
Right.
They
But-
probably have
but-
it on their computers and
Yeah, I know.
that's where it stops.
It's just, you're right, at our last meeting, when we talked about this, we said that we wanted to see the site plan for a reason.
Right.
So they could see it too.
Because I'm sure that it's more of an issue with these guys, especially, going from looking out at a berm
Yeah.
with possibly, trees or plants to looking out at a big fence. And I don't feel comfortable moving forward without them having time to digest this. I just think they are just now seeing this.
Would it change anything?
That was my question.
Yeah, that's what, and that's,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean, that's what I
Yeah,
guess.
so,
Would we be voting on anything really different?
right. Yeah, I think we have to decide if the fence does enough of what we were looking for, as far as, site, to move forward. I'm not sure, even if the property owners, they didn't want it to begin with, so they're not gonna have it there.
Right.
It's up to the council.
The major change here is the fence versus the berm and this moving of the driveway. I don't think it's a big enough change, seeing the site plan, that would change my direction on it. You can't put a driveway on the top of the sewer line. You can't.
Right. Yeah, I don't think we'll be able to answer the water questions till the survey's done. We're gonna move forward with the survey until this gets approved.
Right.
It's a sequence here.
What survey are you leaning to, Scott?
The civil.
The civil surveys they have to do. Get approval for construction.
So is that when the drainage study would come into effect?
If the council does not accept their request.
Well, that's the problem I have with this whole thing is I really want to do a study, and we're for sure what is going to happen.
Let's be clear. That's yours, come back up. My understanding was,
Come on up.
as part of the process, you get civil engineering to sign off, there's two separate surveys that they have to sign.
No, two separate civil engineers have to stamp it and put their
And what
approval on.
exactly is that? What are they approving? Is drainage a part of that?
Absolutely. Law requires on a civil engineering plan, you have to receive the water that's above you and you have to disperse it below you. To do we're fairly certain this is a 100-year floodplain. There's a whole bunch of water issues right here. We're below that.
Right.
We have to receive that problem and disperse it. We're required by law to do that. And the civil engineer has to make sure this plan is doing that, and two of them have to stamp it to make sure.
So stormwater drainage would be on top of that. Be an extra requirement on top of. The civil
Well, I
engineer.
was just gonna say, so if you have to have two people stamp off on it, then why are you having an exemption for the drain well? I mean, isn't that just part of it? Why do you have to have an exemption?
Would a study be redundant?
That's what
think
I'm
there was-
asking.
I think there was a
Because the study would be done by engineers anyway.
That's what I'm asking.
There was a request at planning and zoning at last meeting that was presented that was a request for planning and zoning to request that we do.
Drain water,
Yes,
Drainage study.
Stormwater.
I believe.
stormwater.
Russ, is
drainage.
that,
Stormwater drainage study.
yeah, a drainage study, yeah. So,
I haven't followed up on that. But I'll-
okay,
So the request came from the zoning planning commission?
no, it came from Wendy handing a petition to planning and zoning.
Okay.
Petitions.
Okay.
Any other questions for George at this time? All right. And so, Russ, I have a question for you on that, follow up. Do we require drainage studies on all our developments? Or do we just require engineers to verify that the drainage is correct based on lay of the land?
So usually with a site plan and whatnot, you would have a drainage study taking place. Most site plans are not draining into the 100-year floodplain. So that's a caveat on why they ask for the exemption. If we go back in time, there's been times we have not had that kind of paperwork in the past prior to myself and Stu being in place. Usually having drainage studies is just part of the overall process for the development.
So in our recent developments, we've had those.
Correct. Any kind of subdivision, yeah. Anything really in the last 10 years, I think, has had one.
I would have thought that would have been standard.
So the council really has multiple things they can act on, don't have to act on. Can act on part of it, not any of it. It's whatever. I would assume that if the council does take a vote, since we have a separate request, we want to vote on the site plan and on the drain exemption.
That's what I was trying to clarify earlier.
Can you combine them both?
You can in one motion if you want to. It's not an ordinance or anything.
So, Russ, real quick, sorry,
Getting your steps
I'm
in.
gonna get you a stool instead of a chair. So, let's say the council signed off on it and they move forward, they would be required to get the engineering civil study approved and stamped before they could build, right?
Yeah, that's part of, like, with the construction documents and all that stuff that actually gets turned in with the difference in the elevations.
Right.
That would actually get turned in to Stu as part of the building permit itself.
Isn't that a drainage study?
It's not a full-blown drainage study.
So,
It's
okay,
like a piece of it, but it's not like,
what's missing from it? What would we need, what more would they need to be like, okay, now this is a drainage study?
We need the signatures and stamps.
it's, I would have to get with Jason to exactly tell you, I don't know with 100% certainty off the top of my head what the differences are on that, but it's not like a full-blown deal, but they're looking at elevations and they're taking into account where they're at currently, and if they're dropping it down 10 feet to build their pad, there's a lot of different things that go into account on that.
And I think, excuse me, Russ, I think the civil engineering plan is going to show all your elevations and the directional flow at a quarter to a half inch per foot, 3/4 per foot, whatever they come up with, normally around a quarter per foot to a half in commercial. But the true drainage study is done by a engineer of sorts that will calculate years worth of rainfall, how much, how often. They do all these calculations. That's the drainage study is the water. It's engineered program for water. The civil engineering plan is all well and good, but it's just showing us all the elevations that go. And then I believe that once his plan is turned in, that's stamped by a civil engineer, then we would run it back through our own engineering firm to check it over. That's what we normally do.
Correct.
Part of the process. BG Engineering works for the city of Baldwin on commercial applications, certain things like that. Since we don't have an engineer in the office, say like somebody in Douglas County does, they look at ours, do a quick look over to see if anything's missing or something in fact could be wrong. So anyway, that was kind of the difference between the civil engineering package and the drainage study.
So is it in our, like, standard procedures or code that, is it written in there that every development has a drainage study?
I couldn't answer that. Russ might be able to, but that's kind of the way it goes.
I just want to make sure if we
Yeah.
don't allow, that we're being fair for everyone.
That's a good question because, there's some new developments coming into town that are out east. And you got people that are already in my office a lot and wanting me to walk their properties. That's a whole nother conversation. But there's some developments coming in where I could say, and Russ would agree, that we really need a drainage study. I'm not an engineer, but I'm fairly familiar with that property. It seems to me like it's all going towards that
Yeah.
creek.
That's kind of what I feel.
I would believe that if their civil engineer does his job and our city engineer looks it over and he sees a red flag or two, that would be brought up. I mean, you would have potentially a second chance to say, we've found out from our engineer that we need this study because of this, this, and this. So it's kind of up to the council to make the ruling, but
No, I'm good with it. I just didn't know if it was part of code or was part of the standard.
yeah, that's a very good question. I would agree with Russ, most of them are. This is a unique property, the way it drains and it's sitting there by that creek and there's no real development behind it. So if they're taking the water from above and their water's going into that creek, it's kind of like the end of it, sort of. It's kind of unique because it's,
That's
Gravity.
what came to me as well.
I think those drainage studies are how do you get all this water
Right.
to the drain, or the drain that's big enough not to cause problems.
Right,
This one's sitting right next to the drain.
it's right next to the drain.
yeah, and part of that is often, it's how big is your pond, how long can it contain, so many, that's
You
all
have more runoff, but all the water that was already going there is still going.
Right.
So it's good to know that there's a second set of eyeballs on it after the civil
It does.
engineers stamp it.
Exactly.
It sure does. It's Baldwin City policy to have our guys look at it and
Yeah.
bring comment. Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
I think that's why BG is like,
It's downhill.
it's going right to here,
Yeah.
for, but sounds like we got a couple other sets of people looking at it. right? You know, once they see the elevation plan, you know, if they're truly moving, you know, elevation the way they said, then, you know, that it certainly doesn't get worse, it might get better.
Right. Or you might not have noticed it, but that's actually uphill. This is gonna be a problem.
Right, yeah.
Any further council discussion?
I think that we ought to wait it till the next meeting and get more information from the inspector that's gonna do this, to satisfy the people that live in that area. That that's what's gonna happen, that the drainage is gonna work, and that's gonna take away from it.
I think that conversation is a ways down the road.
Yeah, they
I don't
won't,
think
they
that's
won't
a-
move forward until we approve
Yeah.
this
Right.
plan.
That's good.
Sink money into something, then we can come back and just change our mind. I think it's just that process. You know, we're assuming that the drainage is gonna be correct and not, you know, negatively impacting those residents. We have a couple of people that are gonna look and sign off on that. One's civil engineering, two of them, and the others are city staff. And so we have some chances then to say, whoa, stop. We may need to go do the drainage study. And there may need to change the site plan based on what comes back. So I don't think we're gonna get any information between now and the next 2 weeks
Probably not,
for that, so.
probably correct.
Just call that conversation, I'm good with moving forward.
We want to wait and let them look different.
Well, I think the point Susan brought up was really only has changed, other than their concern about the water. Traffic was been a concern from the beginning. And then, you know, it's really, you're gonna change your mind, you know, because the berm is gone and the fence is dead. I think that's the only thing that's changed that they would have issue with.
I appreciate all the concerns, I do. I mean, I live on 10th Street. I know there's gonna be more traffic on there. Hopefully not too much, but I know it's definitely a concern. Baldwin's gotta keep up. Baldwin has to grow, and we're real slow with commercial right now. There's a lot of places to develop commercial. I know that I certainly like a better view, but as a council member and a resident of my own house, it's just different. I can't vote that way. I can't vote based on the view. And that sounds like they're making the efforts with the fence, and I know that's a heck of a cost.
Any further council discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion,
Which one?
whichever one.
Okay,
We can combine the two into
Okay.
one.
okay. I'll move to accept the site plan for the Orange Street development as presented.
Moved, is there a second?
Okay.
Moved and second, all in favor say aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Is there anything on the request?
We can, I mean, does one of these stand out to anybody as being, needing to be independent, or can we vote on both of them?
Well, I think they're,
I think I have two copies of the same thing.
Yeah.
two copies
There's
of the
only
same
one.
thing.
Yeah, there's only one.
Yeah.
It's just that, yeah, it's only, I mean,
I'm missing something.
I'll motion this one too. I mean, it sounds like we have some safe falls, and if anything's there to get caught, it will. So I'll move, that we make the exemption to provide stormwater drainage study.
Been moved, is there a second?
Second.
Moved and second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item is new business, employee mid-year bonuses. Well, first, I thank you guys for coming.
I wonder if you'd voted that way if it was in your backyard.
I would, yes, I would.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is employee mid-year bonuses. We discussed this at the work session. Kind of had two different things we could do. We could give bonuses based on salary increases, or give an across-the-board $650 bonus if we chose to. So it's kind of up to the council, but is there anybody from the public like to speak to this agenda item? All right, council discussion?
I think I was probably on the center on the, the same size stipend and, not that big of an issue for me. I can go along if the consensus is for the same size for everybody. I'm good with
I think it's a fair shot straight across the board.
Yeah.
I agree. We kind of heard that from department heads a little bit too.
It has, I mean, it has its consequences. It's not a slam dunk.
At least one.
Right.
But, I think
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean-
hopefully it's minimal.
Like I said, I'm good with that. Just please be able to do that.
Yeah, well, we were wondering.
Yeah, so.
Right.
I don't wanna get contentious around doing something good.
Yeah.
That I'll entertain a motion then.
When does that go?
You can, Amara, I assume you'd probably make it effective next pay period. When did that go on? I think for your $650.
I'll make a motion that the $650 bonus be given effective next payday.
Second.
Been moved and seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed nay. Motion passes. Next item under new business is conditional use permit for 200 Wesley Street. Russ.
This is a conditional use permit for 200 Wesley. That's the Maple Leaf mobile home park right next to the junior high. Several years ago, the council adopted ordinance 1413, which was for safety, life safety stuff, and it gave the trailer parks or mobile home parks a number of years to come in compliance. That kind of ended in March of this year, and we've been working with each of the trailer park owners on getting into compliance. For this park, they followed through. They've got everything in compliance. Our building officials, Stu Young, made a site visit to inspect to make sure everything was in compliance, which it was. It went to Planning Commission on June 13th. It was approved 5-0 for approval for the conditional use permit. I'm here to answer any questions or. And I will add, part of the ordinance is that after they came in compliance, that they had to request for a conditional use permit for a mobile home park. That was not the case prior to that, so.
Any questions for us?
Is that in perpetuity then, just one single request and then?
Yeah, then they're good, but if they get out of compliance, then we actually have it in that ordinance, how it's all lined out, what would have to happen.
Stu, I have a question. When you, I know when we developed that ordinance in 2019, when we passed that, the main issue was distance between trailers.
Mhm.
You verified all that?
I did look through it, actually 3 or 4 different times, and once with the owner, Chad Oswald. Everything's in compliance. There could be a potential spot where you might be off 4 to 6 inches somewhere. The trailer on the corner, which is owned by Don, I don't know his exact name. He was given a permit from Baldwin a couple of years ago to build those porches on. I believe it's still over 10 feet to the neighbors. That little corner could be just a little tiny bit off, but it's kind of hard to go tell him you got to tear your stuff down when we got a permit. Everything else is found to be in compliance just on that park. But the part of that conditional use permit is that he can't take out really, or especially bring in any more homes without that permit. He has one vacant spot there. I know he's wanting to bring in, but I think in the next couple of council meetings, I sent out some emails that we got to look at all these other parks and where the trailers are over the property lines and all that stuff's coming up pretty fast. So, anyway, to answer your question, I did find it to be in general compliance, yes.
Thank you.
This is the one up there with the high school.
Yep.
Thank you, Russ. Anybody like to speak to this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, open up council discussion. Further comments or anything on that? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the conditional use permit for the mobile home park at 200 Wesley
Nice
Street.
second.
Been moved in second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next agenda item is High Street rezone lots. I will recuse myself.
All right, as you see in your packet, this is an ordinance for the East High Street rezone. This property was annexed into the city limits earlier this year. It currently is still under county zoning, so we have to get it rezoned under our city zoning because county and city zoning don't match up. So this is one of the first steps in this process. This was actually heard at the June 13th Planning Commission. Now, this only encompasses rezoning the property. This does not do anything with plats, drainage studies, or any of that, because there has been, there was numerous homeowners that were there that are concerned with the drainage. So, but this is just dealing with the rezone on it. And they're basically asking to be single-family residential houses.
This one lot that you have up here, is that already a plotted residential area?
Someone already lives there.
Yeah, see, there's two houses currently, but this is all gonna be rezoned. This would all be rezoned. Because they're gonna their plan is to replat this, and these are gonna become smaller.
Okay.
If anybody would like to, we probably need, don't go far.
Is the driveway on there, Russ, is,
No,
it goes to Glen Rockers, is that?
So let me show you where Glenn's driveway is. So Glenn's driveway is right there.
Yeah, is that,
Underneath the old
is that gonna get zoned in too?
No, because he's in the county.
Okay,
It's just this line that I put in, I could only get it a certain size, and I was trying to do it justice.
that was why I questioned it, because I see it was in yellow, I thought, well, wait a minute.
Yeah. So none of that, none of the Glenn's is.
Yeah, Brad Wright, I live over here, and we've talked, just before you do anything, the water that comes down through there it's horrible. It'll get 30 yards, 40 yards wide.
And where do you live?
132 East High. Trying to be like right in here.
Oh, okay.
But Stu's came over and he's looked. I'm the one that asked him to come over there because all that water, you're going to put 40 houses in there. You're going to have roofs, more concrete, and everything else. Well, there's water now that's coming on the east side of 56. It's coming down through the backside. About halfway through where Marilyn lived, the mayor, there's water coming across from the south side. So the water comes here. See where Baker's Pond is.
Upper left. See the football field, it's right by the football field.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, I live over here. So there's water that comes down here along here, and it connects behind one of these houses. And it all goes down towards First Street, where it was basically retention ponds back in the day. It's all silted now. So that's holding up the water getting out. And in the meantime, like Maryland, we've all had tubes float away. And Glenn Rockers, he put them all in, but they floated away. Charlie Pierce, when he was alive, he put concrete over his. They ended up collapsing the rotted tubes, and they had sewer backup. They've had issues with sewer backup, and it's floated my tubes out. Glenn put more tubes in, but they've rotted out now. They need to be put in. So there's a lot of water that goes through there now. And everything coming off this field funnels there. So it's going underneath High Street here, and it works clear down. Can't get through the silted pond. Then it comes back underneath where Scott used to live. So your water's going under High Street, and there's only one tube there right now. So that's gonna have to have 2, 3 more tubes in it. If you drive down First Street and stop and look, Tony Brown's ground there's a big tree there, so that north tube is half full of mud. So only one tube's working. The pond is completely silted. And there may be a whole nother issue that somebody's got to work out with Baker, because Tony Brown might have got that declared a wetlands. So if it's declared a wetlands, you can't be dumping more water in there. And I don't know how he got it declared, but Baker keeps arguing that they have it declared a wetlands. So that's an issue. There's a ton of water issues in there. And then Glenn did his survey. They had a retention pond in their plat, and he said it needed to be 2.5 to 3 times bigger than what they were showing. So the number of houses you're going to try and cram in there, and it's going to generate, and everybody knows it, there's going to be a lot more runoff. And it has to be curbed and guttered. So, I mean, if you guys go ahead with it, make them run it clear down here to 2nd Street, don't even go underneath High Street, because you're going across, coming back. And all the other subdivisions that you've developed, there's gutters out along the roads. So, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak to this agenda item? Step on up.
I'm Susan Buffington, and I live at 126 East High Street, next door to Brad. We get quite a bit of runoff, but mainly I think Brad made a great argument for everything, so I'm not going to go through it all again. But I'd just like you guys to consider what developing that property, rezoning it for anything at this point would do. It's going to kick off the developers of here's what they're going to do, here's what they're going to do. I'd really like for you guys to take a pause and just make sure that we understand what needs to happen in order to develop that property. From a drainage standpoint, a water standpoint, as well as traffic, is another concern along that road. The road is not super wide. There's no shoulder to it. I don't know if you've ever walked along that road. Some people treat it as a highway, and it can be kind of scary. Creating more traffic on that road is going to create more of an issue. And the city is going to have to address that. And that comes down to our taxes and whatnot. So, anyways, that's all I have. So, thank you.
Appreciate that. Anybody else would like to speak to this?
Just be redundant. I mean, I feel like just.
If you want to get your name in the record, just, just to, even if it's nothing new, say you were there, you said, and just let us know who you are.
Patty Brockschmidt, 120 High Street, so it's Brad, then Buffington's, and then us. So we're on we're almost to the very edge. We're right across the street from where they're building the new house right now. So just kind of the same thing. We've only been here 3 years. And in that time, we've had a plumber out multiple times trying to get him to snake and figure out why we've backed up a few times. And they've had issues getting to where they can't see the end of the line. So we know there's issues that are back there. And I know it used to be a pond where our backyard is right now. And bless you.
Thank you, I need it.
When there's probably 3 inches at least rain, it looks like a pond. It kind of fills up, and so yeah, I'm just echoing there. There's a whole lot of study, and I walk and I run every morning along that street. So same thing with the traffic issues. It's 30 miles an hour there. Let me rephrase. It's supposed to be 30 miles an hour there, and when there's a policeman that sits there, I'm extremely thankful. And we're empty nesters now, so unless our grandkids are here, we don't have little ones running. But I'm the one that's running along the road, and my husband runs, and it's a busy place. So I guess just reinforcing what they said. But yeah, if you would just consider the rain amounts that go into the ground and are soaked in, and they talked about at the zoning commission the terraces that were in place in that field. But if those all get taken away, it's just kind of just makes us a little nervous about what's going to happen after that fact. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Open up for council discussion.
My question is I wonder if they did a drainage study on that development.
The one on the west side of the High Street?
One where they live?
Where all those, yeah, where all those
Y'all, I don't know.
I mean, that kind of goes back to how important it is to have that done.
So yeah, I mean, I've been very clear on all this growth is, we do everything we can to make it as minimally impactful on the current residents. Can't make it zero impact. Sight lines, things just can't do, but, these are important things. I don't know where the entrances are proposed to be on this. Are they closer to 56 or is it right in the middle? I think they showed it, and I don't remember where they are.
So I will say this, that at that planning commission, we reviewed a preliminary plat at that time.
Okay.
That plat was voted to be tabled and asked for a drainage study as well as a traffic study due to multiple concerns. Currently, with what they had in the preliminary plat, this was where one of the entrances was, and then the exit was right over in here. But that's all just preliminary. They did have a retention pond on the drawing, but, without having any data, it's,
So help me with the process then. Now, are the developers willing to move forward without a rezone in their hand? Can we ask for those studies to be done? Because I'm sure there's expense associated with that and no guarantee, even if they come back favorably, that we would rezone them. So what's the normal?
So usually the normal process, like with any kind of development, like with this, this one came in from the county, so we went through the annexation process. The next step is usually always a rezone. Now that's just changing the use of the property. That has nothing to do with it, but it does have intent of what is to become.
Right.
So
Eventually.
eventually. I can't necessarily speak on the owner's behalf on if this would stall them out or
I'm
if,
just trying to think of the normal process. And I thought it was like, hey, we need to know if you're gonna rezone before you're gonna go even move this to the next step.
yeah, and usually it's once we get the preliminary plat.
And that's been tabled.
And that's been tabled to the next meeting, but I don't know that that's actually gonna be heard, next Tuesday night due to
That's a
them.
good point. We haven't even got a recommendation on the rezoning then.
No, we have a recommendation on the rezone,
Oh, but not on the plat.
but not on the plat because we tabled it.
Thank you.
But I don't think that next Tuesday night at Planning Commission, I have not received any documents yet. So, and usually I have to have those in the commissioner's hands a week prior to the meeting.
I'd like to wait and see the block before I make a decision.
Well, so the question then is,
Well, if it's not rezoned, then we're not gonna be able to move forward.
well, that's that, but it's not necessarily what this developer wants to go do. The question is do you ever want to see that to be R1 residential? And this developer may not want to do, if the drainage study comes back and the costs are too high, they may just say, no, thank you. But I think the question for council is we've annexed this land, why? And if it's for residential, I personally think we need to follow through and zone it and then make sure it's the appropriate plan. And that goes through the planning commission, multiple surveys, et cetera. So, I don't think my mind would change that ever wanted to see that residential. It may only be, the water side may say only support one house, whatever. That's still, incremental to what we're doing. So
We're not answering how.
Right,
No.
right.
The how is later,
We're asking what.
So you're saying rezone it and then we'll.
well, that's the way it works, is
You have to.
we annexed it for a reason.
And then you check it in later to make sure that they
Well,
got the drainage right and all
Yeah.
that stuff.
the planning commission has to, approve the site plan, they haven't yet. It might not get passed. And then they'll be sitting on some property that we gotta figure out how we're gonna make it residential, or maybe rezone it later for something else, but I just like to follow through with why we did this in the first place. I don't think it impacts the concerns.
Right. We're not even close to being there yet.
The concerns are still the concerns, because you have to get
Right.
past this first.
Exactly.
And we annexed it under rural housing instead of restricted, we want housing.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just hope everyone understands that it's not necessarily a step closer to this plan without knowing any of the answers that we all need to know. It's just putting this into the city property is, we want it to be residential someday, if at all possible.
We can't answer or address any of the concerns until that.
I think they're real concerns. I think they need to be addressed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to understand the
legitimate concerns.
relationship between the current drainage and sewer problems. I mean, those are, maybe that'll get addressed in the study, but yeah, I mean, if we've already got those types of issues, why? And how do we fix that? Even if we don't do this, I mean, those are issues. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah. From having lived with Stephanie now, I can tell you that.
You don't have water problems over there.
No. Water drainage is a real problem in that area of town. So, yeah, they definitely have legit concerns and, but, yeah, like you said, it's a step-by-step process and this is just step one.
Yeah. Any other discussion? Anybody feel like making a motion?
I'd like to make a motion. I move to approve the High Street rezone ordinance as presented.
Second.
Second.
I'll let Julie have it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No, I didn't close.
5 ayes, no nays. Right?
No. Yeah,
Too late.
yeah.
I will say, Scott, the way you appeal to the council for a motion is a lot softer and more welcoming than the case of very harsh and cold.
Thanks, Cory.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have you got a picture of the house that looks like you also said? Your house is so one.
I'm supposed to be recused from that.
Nothing's been approved
So-
by the planning commission, they tabled.
I understand that.
Go to the planning commission meeting, you get to see it.
Next item on the agenda is the fireworks ordinance. Based off of last week's discussion, I'll let kind of Dakota explain what he did, but brief synopsis. He provided two different ordinances based off our discussion last week. One would require us to change the hours every year, or change the days every year because of how it's, that's not what I looked at there.
I mean, I've read the first one around there.
And then the second one outlines kind of how we discussed it.
Yeah.
So,
Anybody here being asked tonight? I think we had some people.
yeah. Anybody here like to speak to this agenda item?
Well, I don't know what was, hi, Elizabeth Smith at 608 11th Street. And I don't know what was brought last time or what got it, the fireworks on
I
this.
will, I'll explain that in just a few minutes. So what was brought forward last time was limiting the hours to 10 o'clock during weeknights, except on the 3rd and 4th.
Third, yeah.
So limiting the hours so they shut off earlier.
Okay.
And that's what was brought forward. Which I think Scott figured out was 20 hours. Roughly.
Yeah, a little bit more, so.
So.
Yeah, it was just shortening the week, so Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. One of those days where the 3rd or 4th would be 10 p.m. Cutoff time. And then any day on Friday or Saturday or July 3rd or 4th.
Right.
Whatever ran would be midnight, which it currently is.
Got it. Thank you for going over that for me. I don't know what brought on that 8 or 9 days of fireworks. It appears to me that's very extreme, comparing it to other counties or cities, counties, what have you, who have like 3-4 days where you can purchase fireworks and shoot them off. I think that there's a noise ordinance in Baldwin City that outlines, the reasons why there's a noise ordinance. And I know that the 4th of July kind of is an exception, and I have no problem with people buying fireworks. I have no problem with people shooting them off, have a good time, celebrate your rights, absolutely. My concern is with having 8 days of this, especially during the work weeks when people are trying to go to sleep. And I know you just covered that, and I appreciate that because that was on my list. But the animals, the children trying to sleep, the PTSD, I think that the noise ordinance addresses sounds that do cause a disturbance to these individuals and the animals, and even ones that I'm not considering. And I think for there to be 8 days of this is kind of ignoring the reasons the ordinance was initially put there. And I'm not understanding what drove it to be changed. I've heard things, and what I've heard sounds a little definitely related to money. And I don't want to, I appreciate it. Everybody wants to make money, but this move seems to be stepping on a lot of people's comfort zones. And I'm hoping we can maybe do something to address the duration of this and make it a little more reasonable so everybody can enjoy their fireworks and yet not hinder their neighbors or everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak to this agenda item?
Looks to me it's 9 days instead of 8.
It is council discussion.
Well, I'll reiterate back what we talked about last council meeting. The reason for that 8 days, by the way, do we get sales tax on these fireworks stands?
I think so, but that's not the reason.
Well,
Right.
that's the first time I've heard that. I was like thinking to myself, I was like, I don't really know if we do or not. That just crossed my mind there for a second. I was just wondering what, because it's like Maple Leaf, like, do we? I don't know. But the 8 days, it's so you can catch the weekend for when the 4th falls during the weekday. So it's like, so say the 4th's on a Thursday, you have to backdate it so people, because you got to stop on the 5th regardless, that's state statute. But nobody gets to shoot fireworks off over the weekend, and that was to catch the weekend. So that's why it goes long. As I understand it.
Yeah, so what happened was, just so everybody listening is clear and you were clear on how this got changed, is every year from 2019 to 2018, 2019, we're getting requests every single year to move it up or widen it out so it caught a weekend every single year, because the 4th was landed on like a Thursday or a Friday, or no, a Thursday, and so that didn't put any weekends in there. So for 2 straight years, we're getting requests where half of them amended every single year. We got to the point where we're at 7 days, and I think state law is 8 or 9 days. I'd have to look. So at that point, the council just decided, hey, let's just go with state law and what they say, and we'll just follow that. It had nothing to do with money. It had nothing to do with anything else besides the requests we were getting at that time were because people wanted a weekend in their that celebration. So that's why we did. That was the discussion during that time. So just to clarify that a little bit.
And in the same spirit, that's why we've included the 3rd on with the 4th to go till midnight, is because everyone's off on the 4th. The people will probably stay and celebrate there on the 3rd, which is tonight.
Well, I know, it was brought up last time too, what other area cities do. And Eudora does the discharge of fireworks on the 1st and the 2nd, from 10 in the morning till 10 at night. And July 3rd and 4th, from 10 to 11:30. And then the sale of fireworks, the 1st and 2nd, 10 to 10, and the 3rd and 4th, 10 to 11. So they only have 4 days. The 1st and 2nd, no matter how it falls, and the 3rd and 4th.
So they didn't get to shoot fireworks off last weekend at all.
And I appreciate that, Julie, and I did do some research as well, and a lot of them are 4 days. But again, that goes back to our issue of not having a weekend in there. I mean, a lot of people like to celebrate on a weekend. So I think what we have, I'll be honest, this year has been one of the most mild years, in my opinion.
Recession.
It's, I mean,
It's not the 4th yet.
It's not the 4th, but
You never gonna.
it also.
Yeah, the 4th is hard.
It also has been a pretty mild year for the sound of fireworks. I thought last year was more mild than the year before. So
2 years ago was crazy.
2 years ago, well, that was COVID.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
One person that contacted me had a suggestion of maybe not allowing the big explosive things that,
How are you gonna regulate that?
Yeah.
well, they wouldn't be able to sell it.
Yeah, but
Yeah. They don't all buy it here.
But I can kind of see what they're saying.
Yeah.
Because it's just like there's nothing and then there's this big explosion.
Right.
It's crazy.
To me, the Saturn missiles are the worst thing. Because there's 9 million of them and they don't stop for 10 minutes.
So I-
But they're not
Yeah.
super loud, they just knock you out of your bed.
I do think we need to do something, and the fact that we didn't, seem like be a down year almost speaks to the fact that this, if we did squeeze it, we're not gonna be impacting a lot of people because we weren't hearing it anyway. But that's not the point. So I did look at it, just thinking about, okay, catching the weekend seems to be an issue. And then, start time and end time is an issue. And part of what you have to do is think about everybody, and the ones that you do enjoy, you gotta think about how much darkness, how much are the dark hours, night hours. Right, so you gotta take that into consideration as well. You cut off at 10, and that's really kind of just twilight, right? So you're really not gonna allow them to do any of the things you'd like to do in the dark. So you gotta consider that. Maybe not an issue on a weekday, and just so that we have enough of those hours in there in a plan that would allow them to do it. And so one of the scenarios I came up with was a 7-day. And so the July 5th, that's just not a state statute.
It is.
That we have to allow.
No, just that you
Yeah,
have to,
yeah, yeah.
you
So-
can't
so-
go past
yeah,
that. It restricts you.
Yeah,
You
if it
can't
stops
go
you,
past
it doesn't mean you have to do
Right.
it. So I'm sitting there thinking, what do we do to move in the direction, for everybody that says it's too much, but still give everybody that wants to do that kind of the things they want, and that's catching a weekend, at least one day in the weekend, and then having, extended hours, enough of those that you could do what you need to do. And so, if we did June 28th to July 4th and just not do the 5th, which is pretty common, I think, amongst cities, and 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., I think that's open for discussion on weekdays, and then 10 a.m. to midnight on, Friday, Saturday, or the 3rd and 4th. I mean, if you look at that, there's only one instance where, so you would catch a weekend, a full weekend on, if the 4th fell on a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, now it'd be the preceding weekend, but it would be a weekend. And then if it fell on a Friday, you would catch the preceding Saturday, or Sunday. But Sunday's a weekday, so it's a Saturday.
Yeah.
You catch the Saturday, right? And then the one that's probably the biggest issue, if it falls on a Saturday, well, actually you get the 3rd and 4th as the 2 days, and you wouldn't have any other, everything else is going to be weekday. So you don't have 2 days where you would have, till midnight. And I think, to me, 8 a.m. in the morning makes no sense at all.
That does not make sense.
I think cutting off some hours, you did. If you're cutting off the hours in the morning, I don't think it's gonna hurt anybody.
No.
Right.
You still offer, 12 hours in that day to do what you want to do. I think that's sufficient. So, to me, I think, I'd like to see you guys think about that, and see what that, it would drop the, so we're at 144 hours in the current plan. That's total, right? 9 days, whatever, 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day. And this would drop it to, basically 90.
What was your start time in this?
10 a.m.
10, that's kind of where I was,
Yeah.
that's kind of where I was at.
Yeah.
And then the question
Exactly.
becomes, I think the only, and I'm okay with, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. on weekdays and then midnight on those 4 instances. They might say, well, it's not even dark at 10. So you're really cutting down my night hours. But you're still, worst case you'd have 2 days of midnights. But every other case, one case you have 3, the other case you have 4. All 4. Then you go to midnight.
I think that's a very common sense plan.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
That's way too easy, guys.
No,
No, I like it.
it's logical, it's
It
concise.
is.
it's
You
easy to
really,
follow.
you put a lot of thought into
Well,
this.
because it's like
You said it confidently.
Yes. That's all it takes.
open for discussion. I mean, it's moving in the direction of people that
Sure.
have
Right.
issues.
Yeah.
We went from
Yeah.
9 to 7.
What?
10 to
From 9 to 7 to 10 o'clock in the morning.
8,
So it'd be 10 to 10 on a weekday, which is Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
So you took 2 days off of it?
No.
2 days, 2 days off our current plan.
2 days off
From 9 to
what you got
7.
now.
It did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's good.
I'm sorry, 2
Yeah.
days off the day, number
Yeah.
days.
Right.
So we're not doing the 5th and we're not doing the 27th.
Right.
And you're limiting the hours.
So it's still
And you-
7
and you took the
days.
hours to 10.
Yeah,
Right.
it's still 7
And
days.
then what days are you gonna have midnight?
Midnights would be a Friday or a Saturday, or
The
the
third.
3rd or
Third or
4th,
fourth, okay.
if they're not the Friday or Saturday.
How about that?
Get all that, Dakota?
I I'll say.
I've got to June 20th start date, July 4th, any day, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. on all weekdays, 10 a.m. to midnight, July 3rd, July 4th, and any day that falls in that period, it's a weekend, so Friday or Saturday.
You
You
got
got
it.
it.
Got it.
Yep.
He was listening.
Would you like to wait tables at a restaurant?
I would break down, I would break down orders.
Yeah.
No, evidence was
All right.
Elaborate.
Everybody good with that?
So we need like first, is this the first reading and then the second reading next week?
Correct. Yeah, we'll make those changes, we'll bring it back to the second reading next.
Call this the first reading, and anybody that wants to provide feedback.
I mean, I guess technically, we talked about it last, so we could call that the first reading.
Yeah, I'd like to get this, since it's a big change, to let this
Yeah.
sit for 2 weeks.
In writing.
Well, and just have people that want to know, have the chance to say, hey, I heard what you want to do and I don't like it, or I do like it.
Yeah. Whatever you guys want to do.
Sounds great.
We'll call this
Yeah.
first reading.
All right. Next agenda item is the strategic planning surveys. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Scott, I'm gonna kick this over to
Yep.
you.
So this will be our committee meeting as well. So we did meet last Friday. We had Dr. McCarthy join us to review the two RFP responses that we put out for doing the surveys as part of our strategic plan, the qualitative pieces. We had two responses back. They were in your packets. And we had a lot of good discussion around both of them. And so the committee settled on a recommendation for the council I gotta get to the page if you're following along. So the ETC was the one the committee recommended, and it's page 22 as far as their cost proposal. And I can kind of highlight it for you, but there's two surveys involved in what they proposed. The community survey, and they kind of outline how that would go, and there's a lot of work that goes into developing it and getting it the way we want. Council would have final decision on what that survey would look like and all the specifics about that. The committee will kind of handle getting that to a point where the council can make some decisions. If we need to do work session, we'll do that. So that survey fee is $12,750 for a survey. And we were proposing to the council that we do this annually as part of our plan. And then, as you recall, we were also looking at, as part of the hiring, retaining, training, retaining quality staff, is an employee survey. That was also part of the proposal, and that would be $6,750 annually for that report. And they offered, if we were willing to sign up for 3 years, to hold our costs flat for the next 3 years. They normally do 3%, inflation to that. So, open for questions. Julie, anything you want to add as far as the discussion we had and recommendations? Well, the other thing is, talk about the timing of it, maybe, that we're shooting for.
No, but I was going to say that ETC has done a lot of surveys, they've done warrant surveys and other places too, so they are really professional in how they're doing things, and they are concise with everything.
Yeah, they provide a lot of references in there. There's a 147-page document that had a lot of the things they previously did. They're out of Olathe. So they're 167. I didn't read the last 20.
24.
Yeah.
Tucker out.
So what we suggest as a committee to the council is we shoot for October for the community survey. And then we would do the employee survey in January. So that, and based on their timelines that they show, that's doable. If we make a decision now, we should be able to hit both. This is October. Have that survey ready to go and launched.
This is only the qualitative piece.
So it's the qualitative pieces of that. So part of what has to happen here is we got to go through each one of those and say what kind of questioning do we need to do to try to figure out, how we're doing in these spaces. And some of the stuff they did was very interesting, where they would actually rate the importance of that performance indicator. People are like, that's not important at all. And then how they thought you were doing on it. So it kind of gave you two metrics on, is this service or performance indicator important to that person, and how are we doing on it? So you kind of can bubble up what's important and what needs work. And so there was some pretty good outcomes of what they had in surveys. And if we can get anything close to that, I think we'd be, well on the way to really having that strategic plan, driving some real impact.
Qualitative stuff, I mean, do they have a minimum percentage of citizens to reach, and,
No, they talked about the success they've had, in previous surveys, but most of the towns are a little bigger than ours. I don't remember if they had a minimum, reach to get, I guess usable data. But I think that's something we could certainly ask.
My concern is that you paid 20 grand for all this and it just ends up being a bunch of focus group data, which has a ton of issues with it. Focus groups only reach people willing to show up to a focus group.
No, I think, so that's a great point. I think they talked about a methodology of.
That's why I'm getting at.
Yeah, so obviously, mailing, I think, was predominant for both of the respondents, because mailing specifically to that individual, not residents, pre-announcing the mailing, having people looking for it. They talked about incentive plans that people have done. So obviously mailing is probably one of the paths. And then you've also got, the ability to online survey, either or, right? So maybe the mailing has a QR code or something they could actually go. So there's ways to try to maximize. And I think as a community, we have to figure out, are we hitting all the people we need to get to?
Right.
With the, social media, online, and with mailings. Is there any other things we need to do? So, that will be the trick.
Yeah.
And we may not get it, the first one, not gonna be perfect. We're probably not gonna know the right, there's a whole bunch of questions you can ask. There's way more than we're gonna be able to do. So we're gonna have to be selective with their coaching and try to get it.
You exhaust people if you go to.
Yeah, and so that was the other thing.
It can't be too long.
That's the other thing we're gonna have to make a decision on. And they've got suggestions on that too.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'll say this, I mean, I know it's a pretty penny, but I think you're getting what you're getting out of it as far as your penny's worth.
Yeah.
You cannot do a strategic plan without qualitative data.
Right.
Period.
Yeah.
And there's no way to get it in a fair way besides a third party. There's no way to do it. Because the second we get our Excel sheets out and go door to door, they're gonna be like,
We're not gonna get any type of usable data unless we do something.
nope.
Yeah. Then it's really kind of what a small focus group or a real small focus group thinks we ought to be doing.
Right.
And I like the idea of signing like a 3-year contract.
Yeah,
that's
We'll
good.
have all of our data from one year to the next.
Sure.
And
Right,
we don't have to start over every year with a
Yeah.
different plan.
And I think at the end of 3 years, you go, it's just not giving us what we need to do. We gotta have to think about something else. I think we have high confidence it's gonna do what we need to do.
There's gonna be something to be able to pretty easily explain to a new council.
Yes.
Yeah.
One day they'll read.
Yeah.
It'll make being a new
January.
council member insanely easier.
Right.
Yeah.
You'll have all the answers in front of you.
You're like, this is exactly what they wanted to do. Here's where I would like to make
I don't know,
some
that's what we
changes.
said about our utility stack.
It should help.
More.
So, I think what we're looking for is, moving forward and from the council tonight and accepting the proposal from ETC as presented in their proposal.
What are the other cities that we work for?
Lawrence.
It's in your packet.
It's on my paper packet, it's my phone.
I have to look it up.
Okay, Laura, okay.
I get them both confused. They both present.
Left brain.
Yeah.
Left brain.
Left brain.
Left brain.
Was in Topeka, wasn't
Did you have cities?
The Topeka and Lawrence.
Here's Topeka.
Yeah, I think those are two of them.
Here's Lawrence. Okay, good.
I thought they did one for like
Arlen or something.
Yeah, somewhere. From what we heard about from the Baker professor and Glenn and
Yeah.
everybody there, pretty right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'm good with it.
Dr. McCarthy's gonna stay involved as much as he can, just to kind of be or what they are saying. Right, Stephanie said this was very spot on.
Yeah,
These firms obviously know what they're doing,
yeah.
and this will be a huge step, I think, for us as a strategic planning group to get there. So,
It's a great use of the public's money. I really do.
yeah.
With that, I don't think anybody's here for comment anymore, so, I'll entertain a motion. if the council's done.
I move to accept the proposal from EDC to conduct a statewide survey.
Been moved and seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the appeal committee ordinance. That's the ordinance we spoke about prior to for setting up the committee. First reading. Any council discussion on this agenda item?
Yeah, in the area of duties of the board, 16-114, I was wondering if we should add on to there that it says the board may adopt rules and regulations as it may deem necessary to effectuate the duty. I'm wondering if we should put in there that it has the approval by the council also.
Dakota, can you speak to that on that specific ordinance?
Sure. That language is mirrored from the board of, or the planning commission ordinance that we passed. So it would just be to be consistent in that way that the governing body isn't overseeing basically basic running of the board. So it wouldn't be changing its purpose, things like that. It'd be an ordinance. What we'd be saying is, you know, if there is a process for applying for the, or setting up a hearing, how you do it, that they would be able to control, kind of manage their own internal regulations so that they have to have a hearing on, they can set up the dates they want to have their meetings on, or they can set up the manner in which those meetings are conducted in terms of where they're located, things like that. But the purpose of the board would not be something they'd be amending internally. That'd be something that'd be set by the ordinances that you're going over here.
Oh, so you're reading that as they could change the code without our approval?
Yeah.
Okay, no, yeah, I see.
And the other question I had is, have we asked the planning commission if they want to add this to
That was
their
my
duties?
question.
Because I don't think we should do this if they.
No, I can by the next meeting. That's easy enough to do. Russ, can you send me all their emails or contact? Yeah, I can reach out to them.
Oh, I know.
Any other discussion on this agenda item?
Just pertaining back to that same thing we said to earlier.
Yep.
This would be the, yeah, where the appeal would go.
I don't think the zoning board has anything to do with this.
They don't.
Sorry?
They don't. Setting up three separate, people may be the same, but their duties are different.
If you adopt what was brought up earlier, that we let go until the next meeting that I brought back, you can't use the zoning board for that unless they are qualified by what that code says, by those people.
So actually,
Is that required?
no, it's not. And the misconception is people believe that we cannot change code. That is not, that's false. Unless the code is in state law, we can change code. Period. We've changed it.
So what are we gonna do, Casey? We're gonna wind up in the AG's office coming over like we did the fire marshal before it's over with,
The AG's office.
to get it straightened out, so we know what the law is.
There's nothing to straighten out. You're setting up an appeal board under, we have that right to do this.
If I could address this, I think, and this is, Jerry, you weren't here for this discussion 2 weeks ago, so there was, discussion was about qualifications and the two things that were required for following the code, 263 code. The way it's set up right now, what we've adopted, the big one obviously is that the people on the board can't be employees of the jurisdictions. They couldn't be municipal employees, so they can't sit on a board of appeals and work for the city. And the second issue would be that they have experience and training that would allow them to pass on matters pertaining to building construction. So that's what I think we discussed that at the council meeting last time, which is what that would consider, what that training experience would consist of. And the conversation regarding having this separate entity from the zoning, the Board of Zoning Appeals, but potentially using the same folks is because those folks have training experience that's relevant to building and construction.
Some of them gonna have 10 years' experience.
That's,
It's gonna be master plumbers, master electricians, architects.
so I'm just point to section 112 of the there's a Board of Appeals section in the code. And that's where it's listed out here underneath 112.3, which is the qualifications for that Board of Appeals under the code that we've adopted. I know, I think I know what you're talking about again, that's Appendix B, which has to be expressly adopted by the municipality for that to go into place. And that's a much more restrictive, and you're right, it's a much more restrictive form of a board where it is, you've got, I think, civil engineers, I mean, there's folks with lots of training experience. In the discussion, what we had last time was that it should be, that hasn't been adopted by us, because we didn't expressly adopt the appendix when we adopted the 2003 code. But also that if we did do that, we may not be able to find 5 folks to sit on that board, because there might not be people in Baldwin City or within a 3-mile radius that would qualify, typically the qualification.
No, but it's a general, 2003 is general, because they have to apply that to Baldwin City, Eudora, Overland Park, Topeka, Wichita. I mean, you have to leave it general, and then the cities get to pick and choose what they adopt. You're not gonna get 10 years of engineering experience on your city planning commission in Baldwin City, Kansas. That's absurd. That's absurd.
I won't speak to the absurdity of it. The council could adopt that if it so chose to by expressly adopting that Appendix B of the 2003 International Building Code. The building code that was adopted does have an Board of Appeals section that's, again, section 112, that speaks to qualifications, and that's 112.3. And those are a little more general, I think. It's not specific types of training, not specific types of, or specific fields. And those are just experience and training to pass on matters pertaining to building construction.
If you read on down that, does it not say, under no circumstances will you change any code?
You go back up, the board doesn't have authority to waive requirements of the code. All the board would be doing would be interpreting and making sure that the interpretation of the code was appropriately interpreted. So it's a question of, did the building inspector follow the code as written? But that board isn't going and making decisions about
changing.
The board, they don't have the authority. Well, it's not to change the code, they don't have the authority to waive the code. They couldn't say.
That's right, they don't have it. They don't have the authority to waive the code.
No, they have the authority to interpret, make decisions whether or not the building administrator has properly enforced the code. So the Board of Appeals.
And if he hasn't properly enforced the code, then it comes back. And he has to go back and do it again. They come back and say, you have to change what you decided to do because of the way they connected the wire or whatever it was.
Whatever the interpretation is, if the Board of Appeals finds that it was interpreted incorrectly, I think it would go back to the building administrator to then issue the permit because they would be in compliance with the with the code requirements to issue the permit.
If it was right.
And that's, yeah. Solely if the Board of Appeals found that the interpretation was incorrect by the building administrator. But again, as you said, it's 100% correct. They are not waiving code and they're not changing code. They don't have the authority to do either of those things.
Yeah.
The council has to change code.
I don't think the council can even do it under that law, under that rule.
The council can change code.
I don't think so.
All right. Let's, we've been through this.
Well, no, it's a misconception that we need to get cleared up.
So you stated what you believe. I believe that. He doesn't believe that. So until we have a code to change, it's a moot point.
You're right.
So we're not gonna change anybody's mind here by going back and forth.
Yeah, but you start spewing out misinformation and people believe that you can't
How
do
do you
so.
know which one of us spewed up misinformation?
Because I would change code.
Right. So it's, yeah, I'm not sure that's any information that anybody would care about until we try to do it.
Any other discussion on this agenda item? Council committee reports, budget finance, Scott.
We talked about mid-year bonus, we went through that, made a decision on that. Assess valuation, mill levy discussion, we talked about that in the budget work session. NRP and RID projections, we're trying to put together something that is going to show expected revenue in out years based on people participating in that, so we can see how it's going to positively impact the budget in out 5 years from the current year. So working with Baker Tilly to get that view, bring it to the council so we can kind of just have another view of revenue streams for our budgeting process. We're also gonna look at the Brook Street portion sales tax revenue projections on that, kind of give an idea of what those costs or revenues are expected to be, and then kind of triangulate based on costs and when we might be able to do anything. Based on, all the, revenue sources there. And then we just talked about the dispatch fee for a little bit, kind of got dropped on us a little bit higher than what we anticipated. As we saw in the budget workshop, they worked it into the budget, so that was what we talked about. We need one Friday.
So we covered a lot of ground last one.
We did. So it'll be Friday following the next council meeting, which is going to be the 17th. 18th, so maybe the 20th on Friday. And whatever that Friday is following. 21st.
It's just a day behind on each other.
At 7:50, at 7:45.
So make it 7:15.
No, it's, the heat's getting to it. 7:45, second floor, City Hall, yeah. No, I'm gonna make a motion that we have somebody in the city staff that's allowed to, gets permission for the library to control the temperature past closing
I
time.
know, it is getting hot.
It's after 9:15 too. I mean, nobody's.
Took my sweater off.
No, so that's it for me.
Community development court.
We did not meet. We had a couple of scheduling conflicts. We meet again on the 24th, 4 o'clock, second floor City Hall.
Public safety, Susan.
We also have not met. We meet again on the 11th at 4 o'clock.
Public works and utilities, Julie.
We haven't met either. The next meeting is July 13th at 9 o'clock.
Strategic planning, Scott.
You just got the readout of what we did. It was the survey. We don't have a next meeting scheduled. We're gonna wait to see when we can meet with the survey company, ETC. I keep wanting to say EIC. ETC. Lynn, I don't know, we're getting the framework on the website here shortly. Yeah, so that will be on the website, and then once we get that first meeting, we'll publish our next meeting.
Any further council comments? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Move to second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes, we're adjourned.